Chapter 1905 The Sect Leader's Hatred. Sometime later, the clerk returned with the spatial rings and said, I can give you 72,283,000 points for all of the materials here. Yuan smiled and nodded, sold. The results were much better than he'd anticipated, but considering that he'd also hunted spirit enlightenment magical beasts, he wasn't too surprised. After selling all of the material he'd collected from 8 months of grinding, Yuan could easily repay his debt. However, he didn't immediately visit the sect leader and asked the clerk, can I purchase contribution points for the sect? The clerk nodded and calmly responded, yes, you can purchase 1 contribution point for 1,000 points. Then I will purchase 1,000 contribution points. The transaction has been completed. You now have 1,000 contribution points. Is there anything else you would like to purchase? I would like to purchase an audience with the sect leader. That will cost 1 million points. Done. Give me a moment to contact the sect leader. A few moments later, the clerk said, you may visit the sect leader tomorrow. Yuan left the point store afterward and returned to his living quarters to rest. The following day, Yuan went to the sect leader's headquarters for their meeting. You have returned. Do you wish to repay your debt now? The sect leader asked. Yuan nodded, 11 million points, right. Take it. I have deducted 11 million points. Now, what do you want to talk about? I have a lot of questions. I know, but I'll only answer them if you become a core disciple. Why do I need to be a core disciple for answers? Yuan raised his eyebrows. I don't like you. Is that a good enough of reason? Also, that question isn't free, so I will deduct 100,000 points from you. Yuan's eyebrows twitched, but he remained composed and asked, is it because I look like Tianyang? What is your relationship with him? According to Elder Sun, he's just a disciple of this sect. You're the sect leader. Why do you hate a disciple? The sect leader didn't immediately respond and silently glared at Yuan with narrowed eyes. Eventually, he spoke, since you bear his unpleasant face, I guess I can entertain you. I have also been wanting to talk about this with someone, anyway. He continued, in the original world, Tianyang was only a disciple at the Immortal Monastery for a short time and never advanced past inner court disciple because he never returned to the sect after leaving for training. He was an insignificant existence at first, but after a series of events that occurred over many years, he caused the destruction of the Immortal Monastery. Yuan's eyes widened after hearing this, and he quickly responded, what? The Immortal Monastery was destroyed. How is that possible? It was still standing before my master. Sect leader Ji Ran, entered the Shadow Realm. The sect leader explained, although the Immortal Monastery wasn't completely destroyed, pretty much 90% of the sect was destroyed, and it required hundreds of years of effort before it recovered. However, that's not all. Not only was the sect almost destroyed because of him, I also nearly lost my life. Fortunately, I didn't die, but I'd lost almost all of my cultivation, which required me to restart from scratch. Yuan swallowed nervously after hearing this information. He didn't know why the sect leader hated Tianyang, but if his claims were true, it justified his hatred. The sect leader continued, Tianyang, that bastard is a calamity who brings misfortune to everyone around him. Hell, he even caused the downfall of many powerful families, including the 9 immortal clans, who were the most powerful and influential families during this era. After hearing this, Yuan asked, is that why Tianyang doesn't exist in this world? Because you didn't want him to ruin this world again. No, there's another reason for that, but I can't tell you. You'll tell me if I become a core disciple. Even if you become the next sect leader, I won't be able to tell you, unless you want your soul to perish. Yuan narrowed his eyes after hearing this. If I don't want my soul to perish. This sounds like, Yuan had an idea why the sect leader didn't want to tell him, but he decided not to say anything for now. Alright, I'll return again once I become a core disciple. Whatever. Your 10 minutes is nearly up, anyway. Yuan returned home shortly after to ponder about his conversation with the sect leader. If the sect leader couldn't tell me about something because it could destroy my soul, there's a high chance it's related to the outer gods, perhaps they had something to do with the creation of this world. After all, not even a cultivation god could create a world like this. While cultivation gods had the capability to create their own world, recreating the divine heavens and its peoples with their memories from the primordial era was an entirely different story. If anyone had the capability to create such a world, they'd have to be beyond even cultivation gods. In other words, the outer gods, Yuan thought to himself. If the sect leader is connected to them, I need to be careful around him. This was another reason why Yuan didn't want to carelessly mention the outer gods. After spending an entire day pondering his next steps, Yuan left home to visit his group. It's almost been a year since I left. I wonder how they're doing. When Yuan arrived at Lan Yingying's living quarters, he quickly realized that she no longer lived there. I guess she's managed to become an inner court disciple while I was away, he mumbled. He went to check on the others, and sure enough, everyone from his group was no longer inside the outer court, suggesting they'd all moved to the inner court. Realizing this, Yuan left the outer court and returned to the inner court to find Jiran. Chapter 1906 Core Disciple Examination. Shortly after arriving at Jiran's living quarters, Yuan quickly realized that he wasn't home. Instead of blindly wandering around to look for the others, Yuan asked a servant for the location of their living quarters. However, even after checking all of them, none of them were available. They must be quite busy after becoming inner court disciples. After pondering for a moment, Yuan decided to just take the core disciple examination and get it out of the way. Unlike the inner court examination, which follows a fixed schedule, the core disciple examination can be taken at any time, provided the candidate meets the necessary qualifications. After arriving at the location where one goes to request for the examination, Yuan approached the sect elder working there and said, "I would like to take the core disciple examination." The sect elder looked at Yuan and said, "You will need to be at least a spirit lord, as well as have 1,000 contribution points." Yuan revealed his cultivation to the sect elder, whose eyes widened with surprise. First level of spirit enlightenment. And you're just attempting the core disciple examination. Pretty much. What's your name? Xiao Yang. The sect elder looked through the disciple records, and his surprise became shock when he realized that Yuan had only been in the sect for a few years. Heavens! You've reached spirit enlightenment in less than a decade. What monstrous talents! Do you have a master yet? Yuan nodded and said, "My master is elder's son." What? The incompetent elder. I know she's pretty, but you should really consider switching masters. Not wanting to drag on the conversation, Yuan nodded, "I'll consider it." Now, about the core disciple examination. The sect elder retrieved a medallion and said, "Head to the 77th immortal peak for the examination. If you do not take the examination within a month of accepting this medallion, it will be an automatic fail, and you will have to wait a decade to try again." Yuan nodded and accepted the medallion before heading to the 77th immortal peak. When he arrived at his destination, Yuan descended before a small hut and knocked on the door. A middle-aged woman answered the door a moment later. "Are you here for the core disciple examination?" Yuan showed her the medallion. "Yes." After taking the medallion, she said, "Follow me." Yuan proceeded to follow the sect elder to a massive arena. The sect elder entered the arena and spoke, "The examination will consist of 3 different tests, but you will only need to pass 2 of them to become a core disciple. For the first one, showcase your understanding of the Peerless Immortal technique. You'll pass this test if you have reached the 3rd level." Yuan immediately showcased his understanding of the Peerless Immortal technique. After reaching spirit enlightenment, he was able to use it up to the 4th level, but he only showcased the strength of a peak 3rd level. What? It took me 60 years to reach that level. To think a disciple who'd only been at the sect for a few years has reached the peak of 3rd level. The sect elder almost fell on her buttocks after seeing the results. "Why you pass," said the sect elder as she entered the arena. "You'll spar with me for the 2nd test. I will restrict my cultivation to the 3rd level of spirit enlightenment. You will pass if you manage to defeat me." Although the test sounded simple enough, most disciples failed the 2nd test. Not only was the sect elder much more experienced than the disciples in combat, but their cultivation was always 2 levels higher. Unless one was a cultivation genius, they'd have an incredibly hard time passing the 2nd test. This is also why the examination had 3 different tests. "Allow me to apologize in advance," Yuan said as he readied his sword. "Why are you apologizing?" the sect elder asked, her eyebrows raised in a puzzled manner. "You will find out in a second. Can I begin?" "Whenever you are ready." The second the sect elder said that, Yuan rushed forward and began his relentless assault. What is this pressure? Am I really fighting a disciple? It only took 2 exchanges before the sect elder realized she was not fighting an ordinary disciple and was forced to go all out. However, even when going all out, the sect elder was still being pushed back. In the end, after a short 10-minute fight, the sect elder had to forfeit when the cold steel on Yuan's sword touched her neck. I guess I am a core disciple now, Yuan calmly said as he lowered his sword. Yes, congratulations. You're probably the fastest disciple to become a core disciple in our sect's history, said the sect elder. This is all thanks to my master's teaching, Yuan smiled. You can move into the center court as soon as you return, but your new outfits will take a few days to be completed. Yuan nodded and left the 77th Immortal Peak with a new medallion, one that proved he'd become a core disciple. I am a core disciple now, huh? Yuan muttered as he returned home. This was Tian Yang's dream before everything happened in the desolate continent. As Yuan walked back to his living quarters, he noticed a certain beauty approaching him from a distance. You, Xiao Yang, you're back. It was Shi Meili. Hey, looks like you've made it to the inner court. Ji Ran learned that we could purchase contribution points, so we all made the move once we met the cultivation requirement, she explained. When did you return? She then asked. Yesterday. So, how was it? Where did you go? And was it worth it? I went to a place called the Desolate Continent. Although it'd cost me 10 million points, it was worth it since I managed to acquire over 70 million points, despite my 50% deduction penalty. If it weren't for the 5-year 50% point deduction penalty from the tournament, he would have earned over 140 million points from the trip. 70 million points. That's enough to purchase every treasure in the point store. Shi Meili exclaimed with a shocked face. It's definitely more than I need. If you need anything from the store, let me know. Not really. Although it'd be nice to have more treasure, I am mostly doing this trial for the experience. And now that you're back, do you know when you'll leave? I still have some questions for the sect leader. I'll let you know in about a week. I understand. I'll let the others know. Yuan nodded and returned home, but not for long. He returned to the point store to purchase another audience with the sect leader. The following day, Yuan went to meet with the sect leader. You're back already. What's the rush? Yuan showed the medallion he'd acquired from the core disciple examination to the sect leader and said, well, I became a core disciple, and there's no reason to idle around when I can ask you questions immediately. Very well. Ask me. Yuan began asking his questions. You said this world is a real world. Can you elaborate? This question will cost you 1 million points. Just answer it. I don't care how many points it cost. This world may seem like a replica of the 9 heavens, because it is. A perfect duplicate, to be precise. A duplicated world. How does that work? And why? Yuan raised his eyebrows. Chapter 1907 Rashira. It is exactly as it sounds. This duplicated world is an exact replica of the original, from the people to the locations, even down to the timeline. At least, that's how it should have been, the sect leader said, his voice trailing off as he paused. Tian Yang, Yuan spoke. As far as I am aware, he doesn't exist in this world. Elder Sun tried looking for him in the desolate continent but to no avail. However, for some reason, her memories progress as if he exists. The sect leader nodded, indeed. Although Tian Yang couldn't be replicated for some reason, the people who had a connection to Tian Yang in the original world were perfectly duplicated, their memories included. However, that memory would only trigger if they are reminded of Tian Yang. Why couldn't Tian Yang be duplicated? He's only a single individual. Honestly, I am not the creator of this world. The one who created it said something along the lines of, only being able to duplicate what's not beyond their powers. And since I am not the creator, I also cannot tell you why it was created. Yuan narrowed his eyes and responded after a moment of silence, I already knew you weren't the creator when you told me this was a real world. Even a cultivation god would not be capable of this. I cannot imagine who or what could have such powers. The sect leader smiled and said, I could tell you, but your soul would be extinguished. You told me that before. The only way that could happen is if the information is beyond human comprehension. Oh, the sect leader expressed surprise at Yuan's words. You are quite knowledgeable. Did your master, your real one, tell you that? Not quite. I came from a family that is very familiar with this sort of topic. Why don't you try telling me? I bet my soul won't be destroyed. However, the sect leader shook his head and said, "Trust me, it's for your own good." Yuan narrowed his eyes and spoke, "Is it an outer god?" "You." The sect leader stood up from shock, his eyes as wide as saucers. "You know about the outer god. The family has studied their existence for generations. So this world was created by an outer god, huh? I figured." The sect leader swallowed nervously. He never thought he would find someone who was also aware of the outer gods. "How much do you know about the outer gods?" he asked Yuan. "Honestly, not a whole lot. Are you willing to exchange information? I have been trying to learn more about them for some time now," said the sect leader. Yuan nodded. "Why don't you start by telling me how your connection to the outer god started so I can get a better understanding of the situation?" "How it started, huh?" The sect leader gazed out the window, his eyes distant as he spoke. "It was, incredibly random. In fact, the outer god was the one who reached out to me first. I remember being on the brink of death, my final breath slipping away. In those last moments, I found myself longing to relive the early days of the immortal monastery. And then, before I even realized what had happened, I was here, in this world, as an overseer of sorts. I have acquired the power to control the time of this world, but my powers are limited. For example, I cannot speed up time, but I can rewind time for a few minutes at most." Yuan pondered for a moment before asking, "Have you spoken to the outer gods since coming here? What is their goal?" The sect leader shook his head and said, "I've only spoken to them once, when I first arrived in this world. They told me about their identity as an outer god, as well as their name, and told me to watch over this world. I haven't heard from them since." "How long have you been here? And what was their name?" "I've only been here for about 50,000 years. The outer god called itself Rashira." "Rashira, huh? That's a new name," Yuan thought to himself. "So this whole trial thing was your own doing? Not because you were told by the outer god?" Yuan then asked. "Yes, this is all of my own accord." "Why?" The sect leader sighed, his gaze heavy with contemplation. "Although the people in this world are undeniably real, it doesn't feel real to me. It's as if I'm merely watching a preordained performance, a grand play orchestrated by the universe itself, or so I once believed. But after the events on the desolate continent, I came to a realization, some things have changed due to Tian Yang's absence. However, the true extent of these changes remains unknown. Anyway, my reason for opening up this world is simple. I just want to pass down my inheritance to those living in the original world. Although I am not dead, my soul is now bound to this world, so I won't be able to return to the original world." "What about the residents of this world? Can they leave?" Yuan asked. "No, their souls are also bound to this world. Only those who are not originally from this world, like you, can leave." "What happens when we leave? Do we just disappear from this world? And can we return once we leave?" The sect leader swiftly responded, "You can return as long as your body in this world doesn't die. Once you leave, your body will temporarily disappear until you return. So it's similar to Cultivation Online, but we only have one life in this world." Yuan compared the two worlds. "Do you plan on leaving soon?" the sect leader suddenly asked. "Yes. My progress in the trial won't reset or anything while I am gone, right? Since I have already finished the first two requirements, I only need to master the Peerless Immortal technique to complete the trial." "Don't worry, you will continue where you left off. However, since time flows slower in here, it's better to master the technique here. Anyway, tell me what you know about the outer gods now." "You're not leaving until you do so," said the sect leader. Chapter 1908 A Familiar Face. "Don't worry, I will tell you everything I know about outer gods. It won't be much, so don't have any high expectations," Yuan said. After taking a deep breath, he continued, "I know of two other outer gods, but I only know one of their names. Rashera." Of course, Yuan knew Shira's name, but he decided not to reveal it. "Rashera. The name is quite similar to the outer god I know, Rashira. Do you think they're related?" the sect leader remarked. Yuan shrugged. "Who knows? Anyway, while I don't know much, if anything, about Rashera, I do know that they're working with the Celestial Emperor for some reason." "The Celestial Emperor, huh? Do you know why they exist? Or how powerful they truly are?" Yuan shook his head. "It's impossible to tell how powerful they truly are, but they're definitely beyond our comprehension. After all, just learning of their existence could shatter one's soul. That said, they're not invincible and can be defeated. The sect leader raised his eyebrows and said, "You sound like you're speaking from experience. Don't tell me you've fought them before." Yuan smiled and said, "Who knows? Maybe I have." Jokes aside, do you know how to contact them? The sect leader asked. I do, but I'm not sure it'll work for your outer god. So you're saying every outer god has their own unique method of communication, huh? I wonder when I'll hear from mine again. Yuan and the sect leader continued their conversation about outer gods for the next hour, with most of it being just speculations on their existence. When do you plan on leaving? The sect leader asked him at the end. I need to talk to Elder Sun first. What will happen to them once I leave? Will they forget about my existence until I return? Yuan asked. Something like that. All right, I'll come see you again when I'm ready to leave. Yuan returned to the inner court afterward. I plan on leaving next week. Yuan revealed his plans to the others, who had been waiting for him to return after Shi Meili contacted them. He also revealed that they could return to this world in the future if they wanted. However, he didn't mention anything about the outer gods, as he wasn't sure they'd be able to handle the information. Ji Ran, have you decided? Like I said, I don't mind if you stay here. Regardless of your decision, I will continue to work on creating your new body in our world. Ji Ran gazed up at the sky and let out a sigh. When I was trapped in the Shadow Realm, I spent most of my time reminiscing about my days in the Immortal Monastery. Now that I'm living in it once again, I find myself wanting to stay here more and more. Young master, Yuan suddenly interrupted, before you give me an answer, I want you to reconsider it without thinking about me. I know you want to repay me for getting you out of the Shadow Realm, but you don't need to always put me ahead of yourself. You're not my servant. Live the way you want. If I don't go back with you, who will help the Lord recover his spiritual energy? Ji Ran asked. That will no longer be necessary since I will be reconnecting the 9 heavens and earths soon, and there's nothing we can do until then since I cannot log out. Relax, it's not like you're leaving for good, unless you plan on staying in this world forever. What? Of course not. Although life here is good, I still plan on rebuilding the Immortal Monastery. Yuan smiled and said, in that case, stay here until I finish creating your new body. After a moment of silence, Ji Ran suddenly dropped to his knees and bowed. Young master, I will stay here to brush up my knowledge and memories of the Immortal Monastery so that there will be no mistakes when I rebuild the sect in the future. Yuan nodded. All right, I'll try my best to finish creating your new body before then. He turned to look at Tan Songyan and asked, what about you? Are you also going to stay here? No, I have experienced enough. I'll leave with you. All right, let's return here in a week. Sometime later, Yuan stepped into the center court. He had never had the chance to explore this place before, and now, as he wandered, he took in the serene atmosphere. The air was thick with spiritual energy, each breath invigorating and refreshing. As he strolled through the tranquil surroundings, his gaze drifted toward the distance, where he noticed 2 beautiful female disciples engaged in conversation. Both wore the distinctive robes of core disciples, their presence standing out. When Yuan noticed the disciples, they also noticed him, as he was still wearing his inner court outfit. Hey, inner court disciples are not allowed to be here. Are you lost? One of them called out Yuan. Quote. Yuan didn't respond, too preoccupied with staring at the disciple's face. It was undeniably beautiful, but that wasn't why he was fixated on it. There was something strangely familiar about her features, a nagging sense of recognition that he couldn't quite place. You look familiar. The female disciple suddenly said out loud what Yuan was thinking, and she began approaching him. As the female disciple drew closer, Yuan's eyes widened slightly as a sudden realization struck him. His expression stiffened, and a flicker of surprise flashed through his gaze. In a low voice filled with disbelief, he muttered, Mang Lily. How do you know my name? Do we know each other? Yuan wanted to speak with her, but then he remembered the incident with Huang Shaoli. Without explaining or uttering another word, Yuan turned around and flew away as fast as he could. Although she'd matured, that was definitely Mang Lily. But how is she alive? Yuan couldn't fathom how Mang Lily was alive, much less a core disciple, when she died as an outer court disciple in the original timeline. Chapter 1909 Mang Lily. What the hell? Who was that? The disciple who was with Mang Lily asked shortly after Yuan left. Mang Lily shook her head and said, I don't know, but he looked familiar, and he appeared to know me, too. He was probably just another admirer. You're a core disciple, so it's not weird. Mang Lily looked in the direction Yuan had left and mumbled, an admirer, huh? Meanwhile, after leaving, Yuan returned to his living quarters to ponder about what had just happened. Mang Lily is still alive in this timeline. So you're telling me that Mang Lily survived because Tianyong doesn't exist in this world, even though she died before Tianyong left the bamboo garden. Yuan was beginning to wonder if Tianyong was truly a calamity who brought misfortune to others, as Huang Shaoli and Mang Lily had survived because Tianyong didn't exist in this world. In the original timeline, Tianyong remained unaware of the true culprit behind Mang Lily's death for a long time, only uncovering the truth far later, long after he had already freed Kulas from the immortal confinement dungeon. And it happened only because he'd coincidentally encountered Bai Zhan. So she made it to core disciple, huh? A smile appeared on Yuan's face. The following day, Yuan went to visit Elder Sun even though she had told him to visit him next week, as he intended to spend his last few days in this world with her. However, when Yuan arrived at the Immortal Sun Peak, he was met with an unexpected sight. Unlike usual, Elder Sun was not alone. Standing beside her, engaged in conversation, was a female disciple dressed in the core disciple's uniform. Though her back was turned to him, obscuring her face, Yuan didn't need to see it to recognize her. It was Mang Lily. Realizing this, Yuan turned around, but before he could leave, Elder Sun noticed him and called out to him, Xiao Yang. What are you doing, Xiao Yang? Mang Lily turned to look at Yuan with interest. You're the disciple from yesterday. Don't tell me you followed me all the way here because you're an admirer of mine. Admirer? What are you talking about? That's my disciple, Elder Sun said. What? You accepted a disciple? When? Mang Lily exclaimed, her face full of surprise. Not too long ago, right after you left the sect for your mission, Elder Sun said. Xiao Yang, come greet your senior apprentice sister. Whatever. If anything happens, the sect leader will take care of it. Yuan sighed inwardly as he approached them. Hello, senior. My name is Xiao Yang. Yuan greeted Mang Lily a moment later. Hey, why did you run away yesterday? Mang Lily wasted no time asking him, almost as if she was worried he might run away again. I wasn't running away, he quickly denied. Don't lie. You were definitely running away. Were you afraid of getting in trouble? Why would he be in trouble? Elder Sun asked. He was inside the center court, she explained. Yuan shook his head, but instead of explaining with words, he showed the core disciple's medallion to her. What? When did you become a core disciple? Elder Sun's eyes widened with surprise. Right after we returned from the desolate continent, he replied. Unbelievable, do you even know what it means to rest? You're just like a certain someone I know, Elder Sun sighed. Yuan's heart skipped a beat when Elder Sun almost mentioned Tianyong. Is she purposefully not mentioning him by name because of what happened? He wondered. So, what are you doing here? Elder Sun then asked. Nothing much. I just wanted to spend some time with you. With me? Elder Sun raised her eyebrows in a puzzled manner. Yuan silently nodded. You came here not to train but to spend time. I don't remember you being this clingy, she teased. I'm entering seclusion soon, Yuan said. Is that so? How long? He shook his head. I don't know. Then when are you going to enter seclusion? In a week. Mang Lily glanced between Yuan and Elder Sun, her gaze shifting back and forth for a brief moment. Then, with a soft smile, she said, I'll leave you two alone. Before Elder Sun could say anything, Mang Lily flew away. Who was that, anyway? Yuan asked shortly afterward. Disciple Mang Lily. She's one of Elder Jing's disciples, and she'd recently returned to the sect from a mission, Elder Sun gave a brief explanation. This is the first time you're showing interest in another disciple. Don't tell me you're actually an admirer. Elder Sun smiled in a teasing manner. Yuan shook his head with a bittersweet smile. It's only because you seem close with her, even though you're a loner. What? A loner? I am most certainly not a loner. Elder Sun hastily refuted. Oh yeah. If you're not a loner, how come I never see you with anyone besides Elder Jing and myself? Elder Sun was left speechless for a moment before she responded, I hang out with plenty of people. It's just that I only do that when you're not here. Sure thing. Yuan and elder son continued going back and forth. After a long conversation, elder son said, "To tell you the truth, I am considering leaving the sect." "What? Why?" Yuan's eyes widened after hearing this sudden confession. "As you already know, I joined the sect to distance myself from my family. However, it's not as if I severed ties with them completely," elder son explained, her tone calm yet laced with an underlying weight. "Eventually, I will have to return, and I feel like that time is approaching. So you'll be gone by the time I emerge from my seclusion." She nodded. "Possibly." After a moment of silence, Yuan said, "If you're not here when I return, I'll go to where you are." "Don't. It's too dangerous." Elder son quickly rejected. "How so?" "Even ignoring the fact that not just anyone can enter the Holy Continent, my family is special. No matter how special they are, I will figure out a way to see you again," Yuan casually said with a calm smile on his handsome face, leaving her momentarily speechless. Chapter 1910 Family Seal. "Is there anything I can say that will change your mind?" elder son asked, still reluctant to let him visit her family. Yuan smiled. "You should know me well enough by now to know the answer to that." Elder son sighed, "Even if your life might be endangered, I'm sure you'll protect me." After a moment of silence, elder son said, "Fine, if that's what you want to do. However, you must accept something from me." "Oh, a gift from you. Why would I refuse something like that?" "In that case, take it." Elder son suddenly flicked his forehead, the motion swift yet oddly gentle. A warmth spread from the point of contact, washing over him like a comforting embrace. Although Yuan couldn't see it, a faint red symbol briefly appeared on his forehead, glowing softly before fading away as if it had never existed. The warmth lingered for a moment before dissipating, leaving behind an inexplicable sensation, as though something had subtly changed within him. "What did you do?" Yuan asked as he rubbed his forehead. "I gave you my family seal. It basically recognizes you as someone approved by me. As long as you have that, my family won't kill you, probably." "A family seal?" Yuan raised his eyebrows, looking slightly surprised. "Isn't that something one gives to someone who joins their family? We're practically married now. What kind of nonsense is that?" Elder son sighed out loud. "Family seals can be given to people outside the family, but only those from the main family are allowed to do so." Yuan chuckled, "Is that so?" Despite elder son's casual demeanor, the act she had just performed was anything but trivial. Bestowing a family seal was an incredibly significant and meaningful gesture, one that carried deep implications. It was not something given lightly, nor was it an act done on a whim. This was especially true for families with immense influence and reputation. Whether Yuan realized it or not, the family seal symbolized something far greater than mere sentiment. For the next several days, Yuan would spend all of his time on the Immortal Sun Peak with elder son. They would talk about many things, from their hobbies to their goals in life. Time passed quickly, and in the blink of an eye, it was time for Yuan and his group to leave the Immortal Monastery. "I'm going to enter seclusion today, elder son. If you're not here by the time I come out, I'll definitely come visit you in the Holy Continent." Elder son nodded and silently watched as Yuan disappeared from the Immortal Sun Peak. Sometime later, Yuan and the others went to meet with the sect leader. Outside the sect leader's headquarters, Jiran bid them farewell. "Good luck out there, everyone. You too. Since time flows much faster in this world, it'll probably be a while for you before we return," Yuan said. Jiran smiled and replied, "Even if it takes millions of years, it still wouldn't compare to my time inside the Shadow Realm." After saying their goodbyes to Jiran, Yuan and the others went inside the building to meet with the sect leader. "Are you all leaving?" the sect leader asked. "Yes. Very well. Once you leave, you will wake up on an island. To leave, you just need to go outside and enter the portal," said the sect leader. The sect leader snapped his fingers, and a swirling purple portal materialized before them. Without hesitation, Yuan stepped forward, entering the portal first, followed closely by Tan Songyan and the others. The instant they crossed the threshold, their vision went blank. A strange weightlessness overtook them, their senses fading as their consciousness drifted away, much like when a player entered Cultivation online. A few moments later, Yuan's eyes fluttered open. Blinking away the lingering haze, he slowly took in his surroundings. He was lying on a bed inside a modest yet unfamiliar room, the atmosphere calm and still. Instinctively, he inspected his body, running his hands over himself. Sure enough, he was back in his original body. Just as he got out of the bed, a notification appeared before him, something he hadn't seen in years. Less than you have received, Seal of the Eternal Sun, greater than. Seal of the Eternal Sun. Is that Elder Sun's family seal? Yuan mumbled. Seal of the Eternal Sun. When he tried to look up its information, there were only question marks. However, what truly surprised Yuan was that the seal had carried over from the other world. Sometime later, Yuan stepped out of the room and made his way outside. As he exited the building, his gaze was immediately drawn to his surroundings. He found himself standing atop a small floating island, suspended in the vast sky. A gentle breeze swept past, carrying an air of mystique. However, what truly caught his attention was the sheer number of similar floating islands stretching across the horizon, thousands of them, each seemingly housing other participants. Yuan attempted to step off the island, but the moment he did, he was met with an invisible force. A barrier surrounded the entire floating island, preventing him from leaving. He pressed his hand against it, feeling a faint resistance, solid yet intangible. Its purpose was obvious. The barrier was likely there to prevent participants from interfering with one another. Suddenly, Yuan's attention was drawn to movement nearby. The door of the adjacent building opened, and a familiar figure stepped out. It was Lan Yingying. Her elegant form emerged into the open, her gaze sweeping across the floating islands before finally landing on Yuan. Lan Yingying waved at him. Her mouth was moving, but Yuan couldn't hear what she was trying to say. Yuan pointed at the portal nearby before entering it, disappearing from the island. Lan Yingying followed suit and entered the portal on her island. After emerging from the other side, Yuan and Lan Yingying found themselves back inside the City of Radiance. Moments later, Tan Songyan and the others also appeared out of thin air beside them. The end. If you enjoyed the audio, please